This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to the OI podcast, the Otago Institute podcast, in-depth conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and mataranga Māori, brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, I'm Dr. Barb, and today we're talking with Shireen Taweel about her exhibition 5364 Nocturne in the Dunedin Public Art Gallery. The exhibition is open already from the 5th of October right through until the 2nd of March 2025. I can't believe I'm saying 2025, but it is absolutely fabulous. I spent 90 minutes there this morning. It's a wonderful space to go into. It's really lovely. So thank you very much for that, Shireen. And kia ora, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Val. Thank you. It's such a pleasure and honour to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I've got a little introduction for you here. Shireen is the Dunedin Public Art Gallery's International Visiting Artist for 2024, based in Warrane. Is that how you say that? Sydney?
Warrane.
Shireen is a multi-disciplinary research-led artist whose work considers the histories, futurisms of collective space, materiality and cultural practice. There are a lot of words in there, Shireen.
Thank Lauren Gutzel also for that, the curator.
Yeah, so that's that's Lauren Gutzel, who luckily we had on we were very privileged we had her on last week, along with Lucy, talking about the Groundbreakers exhibition that's on.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, so your most recent, we're here to talk today about your most recent work, which looks at the influence of celestial navigation technologies of Arab astronomy on the future movement of people through migration and pilgrimage. Again, that's quite an involved set of words there. Shireen, you have a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Tasmania College of Arts, a Graduate Diploma of Fine Art from the National Art School. I imagine that's the Australian Art School, is it? When it says...
Well, no, actually, it's the National Art School is based in Sydney, but the Australian University is in Canberra, ACT.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And you're currently doing a PhD at the UNSW Art and Design in Sydney.
Yeah, I just got confirmed. So
wow.
Officially...
So you're just starting that PhD.
I'm 1 year in.
Wow. Okay. No, that's cool. Yeah. Hey, so let's go back through that introduction, if you don't mind, just starting at the starting place for us non-artists out there. Multidisciplinary research-led artists. So that obviously means that you're working with different types of art forms, of mediums.
Yeah, absolutely. And like through the research-led practice, the conceptual development in that research often really guides what materiality, what type of like visual language, what mediums I'm engaging with to share my ideas and creative practice in a multitude of ways. Like, for example, at 5364 Nocturne at the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, you're going to encounter sculptural objects and navigation devices I've made in my studio by hand. You're also going to connect with a series of celestial charts that are from copper engraved plates, and they're prints. And then also there's a moving image work and sound installation. So that's, again, like the multidisciplinary practice that's behind my work. But in all of the projects, predominantly it's centered on the materiality of copper. That has been like the core focus and conceptual practice behind the questions I have in each of the projects.
Right. So it's kind of like you just use whatever material or whatever method or technique actually suits the question that you're answering. And your questions at the moment are around celestial Arab astronomy, sorry.
Yes, celestial navigation.
And navigation.
Absolutely.
And pilgrimages and that kind of very science art interface there, because they're all scientific instruments, but the way that they are made is also very artistic.
Yeah, and that comes back to my initial engagement with navigational devices, was in like the Sydney Observatory collection, and then my work in France and the UK, where I was investigating directly with the Arab celestial navigation collections. And what I found really compelling as an artist is that the sciences of astronomy and many sciences, we can claim, have this direct relationship with the arts, but also spirit and culture. And I think that's what's really inspired me to want to investigate further what is this relationship of astronomy and celestial navigation in the Arab cultures and its legacy and its immense contribution to the world that we know today, the future it's making for us. So,
yeah, and of course, when you go back further in history to when these instruments were being developed, there wasn't a division between science and art. They were, very much the same thing rolled into
in relationship to each other and how
yeah.
they're. That's how I slowly came to the concept and considering myself artist as pilgrim and this journeying of navigation as a pilgrimage. It was very much embedded in the instruments I was researching. The latitudes of Mecca for Hajj kept coming up in all the instruments I was engaging with and handling. And I found that really, really compelling and inspiring to consider, well, there's this huge legacy from the 8th century within the science practice through devices of very much engaging with the method of spirituality and pilgrimage. And this is something us as humanity will continue in practice. It's an old world practice, but it's still very much this notion of pilgrimage is part of our world today. And I strongly believe it will continue on no matter what scale it's encountered in. And so I was really curious of how I could journey as a pilgrim, embodied in this futurism of someone with very high-tech literacy from the Arab and Islamic sciences and kind of build a counter-narrative to how we understand astronomy and the broader sciences and space activity. So there's a lot in that project.
Like the terminology of pilgrimage, it has quite an overlay of religion and Christianity in it as well, which is interesting as a counterpoint to the Arab knowledge systems that you're using for the navigation. Was that intentional?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because it does cross into strongly the Abrahamic faiths. But interestingly enough, like this terminology of Arab science crosses over a lot with Islamic science. And the distinction, I guess, between the two is the Arab sciences, which is a bit more, I guess, diplomatic, let's say, is that through the incredible times from the 8th century of those contributing to the sciences, we had people of all faiths working in these like observatories or like these houses of wisdom, they were called in Baghdad, Bet al-Hakim, where the polymaths of Muslim, Jewish, Christian faiths, Hindu faiths were all working together to develop these really phenomenal seismic shifts in mathematics and astronomy. So I think it's really fascinating because even the terminology of Arab sciences is very open in who it includes, but also this notion of pilgrimage. We all can connect with some form of pilgrimage, whether it's even going to see an exhibition or one of our favorite artworks, or it doesn't have to necessarily be coined on a religious foundation.
Yeah, and your pilgrimage for this exhibit, so you did some of the pilgrimage in Australia, is that right? And then some of it here in New Zealand. So
the title kind of hints towards that. So 5364 Nocturne is considering the nautical miles of this journeying across Aotearoa and South Island, and then also where I live on Gadigal country in Warai in Sydney, where I journeyed further from the east coast all the way up to Karijari country of the Indian Ocean on the west coast of this country. So
did you actually walk across Australia?
I walked, but I also relied on driving. So it was a combination of nighttime walking, daytime driving. And it was essentially a 24-hour pilgrimage over 5 weeks. So it's a big journey.
Did you go by yourself?
No, my partner and my toddler. So the three of us traveled as pilgrims, and my partner is the videographer for the project. So
I was going to ask that because I'm assuming it's you in the spaceman type suit.
It's me as the hajjanaut, the touristic pilgrim
Yeah, I wasn't
offer.
sure how to describe, because it looks partly like an astronaut, spaceman type suit. I shouldn't say spaceman, should I? Space person suit.
A single gender.
And partly, like some of the shots, it sort of almost looks like Arab desert clothing. It's got that kind of flowing kind of.
The garments of Hajj, with the pilgrimage garments of the Hajj, very much informed my design for my costume. But also, again, thinking of like the space industry and the equipment and the fabrics that are involved in spacesuits. I was really fascinated in creating like a hybrid between them, or
Yeah,
blurring
no,
the
it
line.
definitely comes across as that.
Yeah. And then
What is the fabric that it's made of?
it has the Tyvek on the exterior, and then it's heavily padded on the inside, so that it's kind of adapted across all climates and atmospheres and weathers.
So
And
was it hot to wear it in Australia? I mean, everything's hot in Australia, but when you were wearing it, was it more hot because you had this?
well, actually, when I got to the higher latitudes of like 17 degrees south, it was quite hot and still tropical, even though this was July. Uh, so that was a bit of a shock to my system, being encompassed in this like heavy garment. But it was still very adaptive and very supportive of like the long walking, the prayer. And again, when I came to Aotearoa, it was actually perfectly suited for the colder climates and the high altitudes and like
Yeah, I
heavy
did
snow.
wonder, because they're very different climates, right? Like
Really
one is full of
extraordinary.
snow and one was really hot.
Yeah, incredible desert country and dry country in
Yeah.
the winter, sure, which was really phenomenal. But then in the spring season across South Island was a whole
Yeah.
nother
But
experience.
the snow shots are in New Zealand, though, aren't they? From the
Yeah,
audio visual.
absolutely. Absolutely, they're across the Aparati Mount Cook National Park.
Ah, right, yes.
Yeah, so it was a
No,
really
it's absolutely beautiful, the snow and the sounds in the back of the
Yeah.
video. What is that, wind chimes?
Well, actually, yeah, because while we were journeying on these really incredibly remote roads of South Island, we encountered some really extraordinary, like structural metal fencing type, um,
Ah.
yeah, like material. And so we thought, oh, this would be really beautiful resonance of sound and thinking of ritual.
It sounds kind of eerie, like it's,
Yes.
I don't know, like
My
you're hearing
partner
some
is
sort
a
of.
percussionist also, so he's really
Right.
very sensitive to the sound and thinking of like the sounds we were encountering. So we did a lot of field recordings, engaging with that metal structure en route to the West Coast. So it was really great encounter, and I love that as a pilgrim because you can't anticipate what your encounters are, who you'll meet, where you'll end up, because I'm slowly following the latitudes and the navigational stars, which were incredible to slowly track across the island and then have the intention of following the Hajj route. And it was really special because the stars I was following across September were entirely different to the ones I had followed in June and July across the Australian continent, like Altar, which is a really beautiful star in the north that I hadn't engaged with before in my pilgrimage work, was really prominent and Vega. So these northern stars were really strong on the horizon after sunset. So that was really wonderful in the early evening to navigate from. And then early in the morning, we had the Pleiades and Orion rising in the east, moving across. So it was really extraordinary to be so low and also witness even the circumpolar stars that orbit around the South Pole, because I was quite low. It was like 45 degrees south. And so it was really wonderful because I could always pin up where the south was by understanding which stars were orbiting, like the cross, and then there's also Canopus. And then by knowing south, you always know the north. So it was really like just extraordinary working across the South Island. It was a different engagement than I had experienced from, say, Sydney onwards northwest to the
Yeah, because that's quite high latitudes there, isn't it?
Yeah, hugely.
So,
close to the equator.
Yeah, close to the equator, whereas we're much more polewards.
Yeah.
So cooler, but also, and so in New Zealand, your pilgrimage went from Otipoti, Dunedin, across the Alps,
Yes.
and then over to Okarito.
Yes, that's right, which was really phenomenal journey.
Did you go over roads or did you walk, or what sort of
Over roads and walking. So wherever we could take our lovely hire car into some off-road driving, we've returned the car now, so I'm not too worried about
Fantastic. And like in the video, we see you actually using the instruments and we'll talk a bit more about the instruments themselves, and how you've made them and the meaning behind them. But can you actually use them? Like, are they functional instruments?
Yeah, they're actually quite site-specific. So how I've engaged with my research in understanding the navigation devices of the quadrant and the astrolabe is that I've been able to create like a southern hemisphere connection with those instruments. And
so you made these specifically for this pilgrimage?
Yeah.
And they only work on this sort of latitude?
Well, in the southern hemisphere. So there's latitudes across South Island, including Otapoti, Dunedin, and then they have also included the significant latitude change up to the west coast of the Australian continent, northwest coast.
Right. So you use the same instruments in Australia that you had here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you also have another set of the copper etched prints?
Oh, so those prints, I made like a few of them as backup just in case for the journey. But the ones that are in exhibition are very much the mapping and the journeying. So they have the calculations.
Yeah,
of the
I was
degree.
wondering if you had. So that the ones in the gallery this morning that I saw had Otipoti on it, Okarito, and the St John's Observatory.
Yes,
I wondered if you had another set that was for Australia.
There is another set for Australia. That's right. Yeah. So that methodology of developing the prints before the pilgrimage and really considering what key navigation stars would support that journey, and then those maps.
That makes way more sense. Sorry, I thought that you were making them while you were on the journey.
Oh no, I was just annotating and putting notations and calculations down on them, and they had a lot of space to also include navigation stars I hadn't anticipated working with and connecting with during the journey. But I love it that they've become the work through the pilgrimage, and they are like a document or a witness of the pilgrimage.
It's kind of like a journal in a way.
Yeah, in a
but
way.
You've sort of got your notes of where you're going to go, like, you know, when you have the Lonely Planet and you sort of map out, like for those of us who are old enough to have known what a Lonely Planet is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've sort of got your notes of where you're going to go and which places you're going to go and how you're going to, you know, the bus routes or whatever you're going to use to get there, your navigational devices, and then your little comments of, you know.
Absolutely. And it's like there's a lot of clues in those maps I hope audiences can connect with, like some of the stars. All the stars on those maps have a strong connection to Arab astronomy too, that are shared between the northern celestial sphere and also the southern celestial sphere. And I hope that nudges audiences to think, well, actually, 90+% in the Western language of astronomy of the stars are Arabic names. And why could that be? Like, why are most of those stars named in Arabic? And I think I hope that.
I guess in a Western science, I guess the Te ao Māori world would argue that they have their own names for all the stars out there.
And the same as our First Nations cultures across the Australian continent. There's extraordinary, they are our oldest astronomers, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I just think it's interesting in the Western thinking of astronomy and science. We assume it's like the Renaissance, it's like the Galileos and whatnot. But it's like they've all relied on the manuscripts and the mathematicians and the astronomers from the Arab world centuries beforehand, and they've continued the same observations, and like those mathematic equations have applied, and even the terms of mathematics are in Arabic, like trigonometry, algebra. These are Arabic words.
Yeah.
So I think it's really fascinating. I hope it nudges the audiences to think maybe, again, like in the non-Western sphere of astronomy and sciences. It's a much broader conversation.
Yeah. No, but it is very interesting just to follow the etymology of the terms and the words that we're using back, hugely. And then connecting them back. And also looking, because I think a lot of the star clusters that you're using as navigational aids from an Arabic or a Western science type methodology are actually the same clusters or stars where the geography crosses over, that Indigenous peoples are using, because the stars are there for everyone to see, and the ones that are useful for navigation, people who are looking to the stars for navigation are going to be using the ones that are most useful. So it's not surprising that there's a crossover there in the ways that people are using these tools.
I mean, the cosmology, of course, has different intentions and connections to culture, but in terms of navigation, it is purely the practicality of being to rely on and observe over millennia these key bright stars, which is wonderful. And even over the years, working with several observatories and even having the privilege to visit and engage with the Mount John Observatory was really wonderful to talk to the astrophysicists and researchers, and even delve deeper into some of my navigation stars and understand the multitude of stars that are with the naked eye seen as one star, but they're actually
more stars out there. Yeah,
it's nice to get behind the real hard science too, and that form of contemporary current observation in the technologies of the observatory, but also fall back on the naked eye and this beautiful layering of time through observation and understanding how that's developed forms of mathematics too. It's been really wonderful as an artist to experiment with and see how I can push it. And
it's fantastic. And I loved the audio visual. I loved the kind of atmosphere that it had. It had a very sort of, twilight glooming sort of an atmosphere with lots of kind of moonscapes, I guess, but it did it kind of felt otherworldly somehow, how it was, and with the little person walking into the frame and then back out of the frame. And I kept wondering if there was some message that I was missing in the direction that the little person was walking. I'm imagining it was walking in.
Yeah, walking northwest
all the time, because it's sort of because it's shot from different angles, it's hard to tell that, sometimes you're walking in from the left and sometimes you're walking in from the right. But you're always, in fact, you're always walking northwest. Is that the answer? Yeah.
Northwest was the journey. I mean, there obviously had to be some turns a little bit south, a little bit north, depending on what tracks or roads I could access with the navigation. But the filming is very much also a document, and it has a strong science fiction visual language to it. But I really wanted to take audiences on this journey with me as a pilgrim. They're with me on the journey. They are part of that pilgrimage, and that was a strong intention. But again, with that notion of science fiction as a beautiful tool just to open up the possibilities and imagination of what our futurisms can be. And I found that really powerful and exciting as an artist to further experiment with moving image in that way. Yeah,
it totally reminded me of the Doctor Who Impossible Astronaut episode, just with particularly the bit where you were walking into the sea, and I just thought that you were going to go into the sea and then fade out, disappear into the distance in the sea, and then the little space, and spoiler alert here, the little spaceman turns around and comes back out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I went into the sea at sunset, almost as this practice of wadu, where we wash ourselves, and the cleansing before prayer, and then it finishes with the prayer on the west coast. But the ocean is quite powerful there.
It is. It's a very strong, and quite a high tide as well there, a tidal range. And
it was extraordinary because we commenced on this journey right at the very beautiful start of the fine crescent moon. And so you had the crescent moon on the strong western horizon after sunset, beginning of journeying, and Venus was incredibly bright too. And then slowly as we journeyed, we got to the west coast on an extraordinary full moon, and it was just a really beautiful play of luminosity and light. And again, the lunar calendar is very formative to Islamic world and our sense of time. And practice within faith. So it was just a really beautiful synergy to have within the journey.
Yeah, no, it was, and it's really, really nicely, comes across really nicely in that audio and visual there. I really enjoyed sitting there and watching it. And I was really lucky because I went early this morning, so I had the whole gallery space to myself.
How wonderful.
And it's an amazing space. It's a really long, beautiful gallery, and you have the 3 instruments that you've made. Just for those who haven't seen it yet, there's a really large perspex disc that's sort of suspended as if from nothing, held there right in the middle of this huge room. And it has these 3 gorgeous instruments on it, the astrolabe, the compass, and the quadrant. And it's all lit from above, so they cast this beautiful kind of glow on the shiny copper instruments, but then the sort of glow around it, and the room's quite dark, so it really highlights the shining copperness of them. And the kind of shadows on the bottom on the floor just looked amazing, like as if they were, when you see stars on people's bedrooms and things. And I just thought the space of the gallery really complementary, like with that kind of coppery coloured timber flooring, really looks amazing with the copper instruments. So I was quite blown away by how the whole space just looked amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really strong intention, to have like a really balanced sense of spatiality within the exhibition, a lot of room to breathe, because there's a lot of, I guess, information within each of those artworks. There's a lot to look at and observe. And of course, the moving image work is very atmospheric too. So I really wanted to give the sense that the audience is within the night sky and they can connect with the instruments. And then there's the maps, the celestial maps too. So it's really, really exciting when, as an artist, you get to work with a wonderful team, like at the Dunedin Art Gallery, and great curator Lauren Gutzel, to achieve the vision and the sense of how I wanted the audiences to feel in the space with the artworks and with the moving image work as an installation. They're all connected, they're all one work, essentially.
Yeah. No, it's really, you've achieved it. I think well done.
Thank
you. There. And I love, I'll just hold this up so if anyone's looking at the video, they can see it. This is the amazing book that came with it. And it's fabulous. It's so precious. It looks like it's made of copper. It's so shiny and so beautiful. And it's got beautiful pictures throughout of close-ups, not just of the work that you've got here, but of some of your other work as well, and how it all sort of fits together. And you can see through this book how much your love of copper comes across. And I wondered why copper? Where did your association with copper come from? Have you always been fascinated by copper, or are these instruments, were they made traditionally of copper? I don't know. I think of brass.
Well, the instruments are all made of soft metals like copper and brass, but predominantly brass. But the processes that are involved, like with the scoring of the sheet metal and the scale systems, and they're all engraved into the material, and there's piercing motifs like in the astrolabe that are
so
the same.
So is that functional for the instruments to work? They have to be soft metal so that you can engrave on them?
Engrave on them and pierce them and form them. And that's what I found phenomenal, that these are the processes I employ and have experimented with in my studio with my 2 hands for years now. And I just really got so excited that the materiality of Arab astronomy correlated directly into my inquiry as an artist with the material copper. But I mean, initially it came out of a curiosity of its cultural engagement across the Arab world. I, being Lebanese, of migrant parents growing up in Australia, my mum has really extraordinary copper trays and forms of lamps, and there was a real beautiful emphasis that these were precious objects across the Swana region, whether they were from North Africa or Syria or Lebanon or Turkey, but that she really emphasized they were special because they also were made by hand, they were made by artisans, incredible craftspeople that have built this knowledge system and cultural practice for millennia. So I was just really fascinated, I guess, at the beginning with its familiarity, that I grew up with these materials and objects in the house. But then again, through the rigor of art school, you have to really think really strongly about why you're working with this material. But it led me into really beautiful spaces of thinking about gathering and collective spaces and sacred architecture, objects of ritual that all correlate with the material copper. And of course, it's technology applications that still are relied on today. Of
Copper
course.
wiring and
Yes, and the conductive nature of the material, which really I found exciting to work in the knowledge systems of the hammam and bathing.
Of the
Yeah. But again, like within the sciences, like it's fully part of even the future technologies of astronomy. So it's really exciting that this fairly ancient practice of coppersmithing and the material has this beautiful continuation of time that is very much part of our civilization, but has a strong practice too, of course, in the Arab world. So for me, it's been a really exciting way to express myself as an artist and use that as a visual language. But it's also partly I'm just incredibly obsessed. I really enjoy the material and its softness and the accomplishment of working very slowly and having this long attentiveness of care and listening to the material. It's been a great journey, and it's kind of I can't keep up with the ideas. So.
The copper instruments in particular are very kind of elaborately decorated. They're very intricate. They've got lots of swirls and decorations all over them. And then, of course, the navigational bits that have to be there. And I think from an untrained eye, it's obvious. Some of the pieces, it's obvious that they're there. They're the little marks and the graduations around the outside. But then I think some of the other bits there are functional but look decorative, and some of them might be decorative but look functional. So I think it's quite an interesting.
Oh, hugely, and that's the thing. Like I still find really extraordinary is that the astrolabe being the first computer that has been developed, and even the quadrant, and of course the compass and Qibla too. They have such a sophisticated form of science and mathematics within them, but with the nature of the art, spirit, and science all embedded within each other, this like phenomenal, extraordinary expression of art and spirit in these instruments that clock on to precise calculations, like the composition that allows calculative work within the devices I find phenomenal. So it has been really exciting to then like work with my understanding of the southern celestial sphere and understand their placement, seasonality of those stars, and then engage with the visual language of Islamic arts that I've been researching in these instruments and then apply them to my own navigation devices. So that's kind of the interplay with that visual language and those processes that directly come from the scientific instruments too. So that's again like me trying to open up this dialogue that why is the sciences so siloed from our humanity today and our cultural practices and our awareness of like the built environment, and they are all intersecting as art and culture, spirit as religion. It's very much part of all of the world we know, and I really love that playing with my sculptures and even the devices, that it allows me to refer back to these wonderful devices of historical milestones.
I think also it's quite a recent thing that division between sciences and arts has come about. I mean, because like the OI podcast, we're sponsored by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, and I mean, it's an old institution. It's over 150 years old. Old in terms of New Zealand. It's over 150 years old, but that's not very long in the sort of time scales that we're looking at with navigational systems and things. No. But even that long ago, just 150 years ago, it was the same thing, arts and sciences, and there was no idea that they would make an institute for sciences and an institute for arts. It was all one thing. And it was considered, education and knowledge are education and knowledge and learning, and that's all the same thing, however you come to it, whether it's through one. And like the intermix of them was very, very much like not separated, I think. So
and I think there's so much to be lost without those conversations that cross over and cross-pollinate and allow us understandings and seeing each other in so many possibilities. So I think that's very key to me in this project, especially to bridge them and have them in dialogue. But Yeah, I just find it really interesting because even the form of like our built environment, like I've long investigated the sense of sacred architecture, and you have the similar forms of within the mosque context. Like there's a really brilliant play of the spirit within the arts that holds space for people to practice and worship in. And I think there's a really incredible energy within that we've almost lost with like the stripping back and the removal of the hands that many hands have contributed towards, including not just architecture, but in science. Like those scientists were working directly with the ateliers who were making those instruments and those
and the kind of individuality of sciences as well, which
yeah.
I mean, it's one of the things that I really hate about science and particularly things like the Nobel Prizes, because they tend to kind of make this idea that there's a genius person who's come up with something, where in actual fact it's almost always it's a collaboration. It's a group of people.
Always.
And
Absolutely.
if it wasn't that person who had written that paper, it would have been someone else, because the knowledge is kind of building up in that community and it's coming and bubbling up. And even, the likes of Einstein, which people, always cite for the genius, lone genius Einstein. But of course, all his mathematics was done by his wife. So, the elegance of his formulae were down to the fact that his wife was a brilliant physicist and mathematician. But because of the year, she wasn't able to be acknowledged. And he did promise if he won a Nobel medal, he would give her all the money, though. But
absolutely,
which I think is a fair acknowledgement that she had deserved it.
Yeah, but we're still we're still stuck in that sense. Like the way acclaim and those who are like given the prestige of the knowledge often has a strong gender biases even in that, even today. So I think that's really fascinating. How do we shift that? How can we open that up? And not make it so exclusive either.
It is a I don't know. Let's not get into politics at the moment, hey? I know it's on the forefront of all our minds, but let's just push it to the side and go back to the pure sciences here. I looked it up because when I was investigating and going through your exhibit this morning, I saw the 5364, which I'm sure is the first thing everybody sees, and they go, "What is with those numbers?" And then they look a little bit, and it says everywhere it's reflecting the nautical miles between Ōtepoti and the points of pilgrimage across the Australian continent. Yeah. Right, so it's kind of the distance that you travelled, right?
Yeah, I really wanted to subtly hint at this journey and the distance, and that it potentially has a longer narrative to it also.
Yeah. And as a non-sea person, although my ancestors very much sea people because they're from the Shetland Islands, so they were just seagoing people all the way. Right. But I had to look up what a nautical mile was. So a nautical mile is used in air, space and land measurement, and it's based on longitude and latitude. 1 minute of latitude along any meridian is a nautical mile. That's right. Mm-hmm. And the derived unit of speed is the knot. And so everyone's heard of knots, right? Because things like ships go at, 2 knots an hour or 5 knots an hour or whatever. And I always wonder how fast are they going, because it makes, it's kind of an arbitrary value to me. It makes no sense at all.
Our measurements.
But I mean, at one stage it must, when everybody was living on the sea, particularly in places like Ōtepoti, Dunedin, right? Yeah. Like the speed and the distance that you're going by sea is much more important than land-based measurements. So anyway. But I looked up your 5364, and it is 9,934.128 kilometres.
Yeah, just under 10,000.
Just under 10,000 kilometres.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary, and I'm really blown away that. I mean, last year I was working in the collections in France and the UK, and again, encountering this very prominent notion of pilgrimage within the instruments because of the latitude of Mecca. And it really opened up this idea of journeying and my own form of futurisms as a Hajjanaut. But honestly, like I felt incredibly emboldened and ambitious to undertake these projects, but I just can't believe now I'm on the other side of them and I actually got to witness the navigation and apply my navigational knowledge and create the artworks that I needed along the way as my toolkit in developing these works. And the really, really satisfied project that I got to undertake was the Dunedin Art Gallery. So 1 year forward, I was just still pinching myself that these dream projects have been achieved. And
So are these the first astrolabe compass quadrants that you've made?
yeah, these are the first functional devices I've made for the pilgrimage project.
And
Absolutely.
did you know they were going to work? Did you calibrate?
Oh,
Did you calibrate them with
yeah.
other ones to make sure that they were giving you the right
Oh no,
results?
well, having researched them and handled them for 3 months last year, I got a really beautiful insight and understanding, and slowly like building my knowledge and then understanding the type of mathematics within each of the instruments. But I could transfer that into my studio and then like map out how I would develop the instruments. So it wasn't until then I'm using them across the pilgrimage, then I was applying the research and the knowledge and those conversations again directly to my devices. And I found that really extraordinary because beforehand I was more or less like an armchair navigator. I hadn't actually applied the full experience and the very present witnessing of clocking and navigating the degree systems of the stars according to your latitude. So it was really amazing, and it's still an incredible learning and big journey ahead with future projects. But
Will you take these devices and use them for another pilgrimage somewhere?
potentially, but I feel like the pilgrimage journey will continue more or less into the Northern Hemisphere along the Hajj route. So
When you say the Hajj route, what does that mean?
So journeying to Hajj is similar to how a Muslim will pray in the direction of Mecca.
Yeah.
So Hajj is this incredible 10-day journey that we as Muslims can undertake every year, and it changes slightly each year, similar to like how we use the lunar calendar for Ramadan, which is another holy month.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's a really significant and momentous moment in one's life.
So
To be
where's
part
it
of an
going to?
enormous-
Where's it going to this?
Well, so often people begin in Medina in Saudi Arabia, which is also known as Hijaz. It's former name before the family name. And then they undertake the Hajj. But of course, like before the time Muslims would fly in to Hijaz, Saudi Arabia, they would travel across land and travel in the direction of Hajj. And that, of course, before our computerized time, navigation was very important in that journeying. So I thought it would be really interesting to then apply my understanding of celestial navigation to slowly track through stars that are very prominent in the northwest for me to work with. This journey towards Hajj.
So if you
positionality.
carry on in a straight line from
Yeah.
Otipoti through Okarito,
Yeah.
would you
Sydney,
would you then end up in
in
Saudi Arabia?
Mecca. Yes.
And are you gonna continue on that same line?
Well, I'd love to. I just don't have like the nautical skills. So
Because you have to go on a boat then, right? Because you hit the ocean.
Yeah.
So
And
you need a
sail.
seafaring partner. That's what you need. So anyone out there who has the means and the skills to do a massive seafaring thing, and Shireen will be there with the instruments. Now, do they work very well on a boat?
Oh, that's interesting because boats move quite significantly.
And like that whole rocking thing.
Yeah. And to find your horizon too, to understand the degree. Be another challenge for sure.
I think you need to make another one because we could go through like just for those out there. So how the three different instruments work and how they differ.
Yeah, well, the compass and the Qibla for me to use during the day, especially to understand.
So they're daytime ones, so not looking at the compass. Or say the word again.
The
Qibla. And that's just another name for a compass, right?
Yes, it's the name of the compass that orients you directly to Mecca.
As opposed to north.
Yeah, northwest.
Right.
And
That's
it has
interesting.
I've made it with a sundial. So also the sun, when the sun was out, I could also understand the direction through understanding the clocking of sun at
Oh,
the time of the
right.
day that it was.
Oh, that's
Um,
very cool. So it's a
yeah,
compass, but it has a sundial. And of
yeah,
course you can find north as well as northwest, right? Because if you know
yeah,
where northwest is, you know where north is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially if you know what time it is, then
Yeah.
it's great.
And
But
can I just say, I love
mhm.
this word because it's absolutely amazing for Scrabble. It's Qibla. It's a compass that points to Mecca.
Yeah,
Qibla.
Kubla.
Thank,
Yeah.
thank you for adding that to my vocabulary.
Not at all. I mean, and this is again like when I was working in Paris, I was engaging with the beautiful archives and manuscripts of the Bibliothèque Nationale, like the National Library,
Yeah.
and they have an extraordinary manuscripts collection which have the very notations of an extraordinary navigator from the Arabian Peninsula, Ibn Majid. And Ibn Majid is renowned actually for developing the compass. So I feel
Wow.
like it's really beautiful for me, like nods to the contributors of like sciences that we know today. And so many Muslims still they have their own compasses. Like I grew up with a Qibla and my mum would use it and I would use it. And I mean, some people have it on their phone, of course, in an app, but it still like functions even digitally as the compass.
Yeah.
So I found that really beautiful then to like nod to the history of these extraordinary navigators, but also then move it forward into the future potential. But again, then there's the quadrant, which works on the 90-degree system and has like I had a beautiful silver thread that would allow me to eyeball the stars that I was working from
Right.
and
So
then
so
track the
how do you
degrees.
so you use the thread to line it up with like gravity basically to make sure you've got a
Yeah,
plumb line.
and that's right. And then you would navigate through understanding whether the star is setting towards the west. And then every 20 minutes, I would clock the degree system and then calculate where I need to move then northwest. And then there is the astrolabe, which is really such a sophisticated
It
device,
looks
I think.
so complex, the astrolabe. When you see it there, it's got so many kind of little marks and oh man, it was just
The front of it, the reed, is like the star finder, and it's really extraordinary because you're working with an astrolabe, which has the mathematics to allow you not just to use the navigational stars that are mapped on the front face of the device, but if you want to apply your mathematics to any star, you can access the whole universe with your astrolabe, which I find is phenomenal. Like that is really exciting. And even astronauts today have to understand these mathematics applications in case like their computers break down and they're in space. So
wow.
like
So
it's insane.
so the astrolabe, did it take you a long time to figure out how to use it? Is it quite
Oh, years.
yeah,
It's
so there's a lot of embedded knowledge in yourself to understand how it's using it.
absolutely. And like I'm so grateful for those conversations I've had with some incredible curators, like Frederica Giante she was working at the time at the History of Science Museum in Oxford, and she's just such an extraordinary scholar in these devices. And she really like literally held my hand and walked me through how to apply the knowledge and the mathematics and the observation all together with the astrolabe. And that was incredibly wonderfully
Because there's one thing
wonderful.
just like making the instrument, like just copying an original one,
Oh,
like copying one and just like technically making the instrument.
no,
But
you did,
it's a whole
absolutely.
nother, it's a whole nother work being able to actually use the instrument to
Yeah.
figure
And
out.
understand like this relatively flat device has this incredible 3D element to it. Like if you know how to read it and engage with it, you're connecting with like the whole celestial sphere if you wanted to apply that. I just find that phenomenal. You're
It,
holding that in your two hands.
it's
Like it's
quite
really
crazy. So, but
yeah.
it always relates back to the Earth's position as well, doesn't it? Like you couldn't use the same astrolabe on Mars as you have on Earth.
You could, absolutely.
Oh,
So
you
this is the
can.
thing. Within the device, it has all its plates. So that's why it's site specific for me because I've got all the latitude plates that apply to my positionality on the planet. But you could apply those latitude longitudes on Mars. You just need the right plates that you want to work
All
from in
right.
the device.
All right.
So
So,
it's
you
very
know,
adaptable.
if we ever, so I don't know, maybe the Martian, if his computer had broken down, he could have used Matt Damon there with us. I don't know. I like a sci-fi movie where the botanist wins.
I went to the Otago Museum and watched that in the planetarium, and
Oh.
it really confirmed my drive to make the Hajjanod reality, because it's such an Americanized, macho culture of space and the Martian, and the amount of times he used the word "I'm colonizing this place." I just found it really, really disturbing.
Yes, no, I can see that. It's funny.
And what has changed? Since mid-2000s, what has really changed?
Yeah, what has really changed? Oh my goodness. Oh dear, where do we go from there? Goodness me. Oh, crazy. Absolutely crazy. Hey, thank you very much for coming. It's been fantastic to talk to you about this and about the beautiful, beautiful works that you've got there. And, going back to those, just before we sign off, going back to those beautiful copper engraved prints, I really loved how simple they looked to start with. They had this kind of, how do you say it, like a simplistic beauty of them. But the more you looked at them, the more you could actually see that there was a lot of information embedded in there, and not for a moment pretending that I understood all the information that was embedded there. But the longer you look at them, you can see that there's meaning to the everything that's there. But there's also, there's a beauty in them aside from just the information. And for me, as a scientist who loves art, it's really lovely to see the mixture so evocatively put there. It's both of them very, very nicely played there. And I will just say once again to all those who are listening that 5364 Nocturne, the Shireen Taweel exhibition, is on at the Dunedin Public Art Gallery from the 5th of October. It's already open right through until the 2nd of March. If you go, you will get one of these beautiful, beautiful exhibition books. They are lovely. I imagine they're only there as long as they're there, and if you leave it too late, you might miss out. So do go along, and it's well worth going along a couple of times even. Thank you very much, Shireen, for joining us here today. It's been lovely to talk to you about all things copper and astrological. Is that the right word?
Thank you, Rob. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm just so thrilled that this work has been able to come to Dunedin, to Otopedi and the art gallery. It's a real honour to work as my first project in Etuora, so it's a real honour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's fantastic, and we look forward to seeing more of your beautiful work around the place. I'm just going to do a little outro here. If you've been listening to the OI podcast, if you enjoyed this episode with Shireen Taweel, we think you'll like Groundbreakers with Lucy Hammonds and Lauren Gutzel, which was of course last week's episode, Art Life in the Four Seasons of South Korea with Jenny Lee, The Interface of Art and Educational Practice with Andrew Last, Te Taiao and Art with Madison Kelly, Crochet and Intergenerational Trauma with Lissy and Rudy from Lissy Cole Designs. And you can support the production of the OI podcast by becoming a member through www.otago-institute.org. And we shall send you a free membership there, Shireen, so that you can be an honorary member of the Otago Institute for a year. And of course, you can access all the podcasts for free.
Brilliant.
Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. Ka kite.
You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on ORFM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.